Well, welcome everyone. So excited to be here. We're going to do something a little bit different today. And actually, I'm going to introduce you to my better half in this podcast, and that is Jez Fenton Menzies. Jez, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much. Look, I'm here every time. I am the producer of this podcast, so I'm here anyway. But no, we decided we're going to do something a little bit different, Alena, because the numbers have been great this season and people have been really tuning in. But I've realized some people may not know who the host is themselves. Like, we've never really dived into your full backstory. We've never really sort of looked at the host, Alena Bennett. So I thought today, why don't we do a bit of that so that this can kind of be an episode that people can refer back to and go, okay, this is the person who's investigating the real math of business with us. So, I'm very excited to be here, Alena. It's very exciting.
Awesome. And look, I attribute the success of this podcast to you. You know, everything that this is for people is largely because of you. So I thank you in advance, not knowing what questions you're going to throw at me. So be gentle.
Yes, no. So today I'm going to be interviewing you, Alena. I was mentioning before, I did get a journalism degree back when I was a lot younger that I've never used. I've basically just gone into animation and media since then, but it was a good chance to dust that off and think of some of my skills. I'm not going to be doing too much of a gotcha style interview. Today, I really wanted to talk about your backstory and then how we sort of ended up at the philosophy of the real math of business where we are today. And actually, we kind of had to just emergency start recording because we were already having a great conversation and I wanted to get into it today. So, Alena, we were talking about the real math of business, and for people that have listened to the show, they know that that's to do with people and numbers, and there's a sort of balancing act there. But I guess as I was listening to our last episode, I kind of came up with a thesis, and I want you to kind of riff on it and kind of give me your thoughts on it. So for me, I was saying that I think a really important part about your life is, and we'll get into this, is that you have an accounting background, okay? And we'll get into that shortly. But I was saying that that's an important thing because it essentially allows you to kind of act as a translator almost in a way where you can look at businesses and you realize that they can't just be focused on the numbers because you can have two businesses that have the same numbers that end up with different outcomes. So what you are investigating through the show, in my opinion, is what is the things that are not making up the numbers that end up creating different scenarios. Now, this is my take on it. I would love for you to sort of unpack that a little bit and then we can sort of get into a bit more of what else we're talking about, because we were just having a live conversation about this beforehand.
And yeah, and you used a really good, and maybe if I ask you before we dig in, use your basketball analogy, because that actually made a lot of sense to me, and I think it will be for a lot of listeners. And do that because I think actually you might have, they always say in our industry, you can get too close to your own stuff. And so actually what I enjoyed about what you just shared and what you'll do again now with the basketball analogy is you'll help give me some distance, because I think actually what you might be articulating is far more elegant than what's in my head. So can you just share your basketball analogy again, and then I'm going to unpack that.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, I think the power of this is your ability to connect many different things. And so I think it's inspiring me a little bit. And when I was thinking about what this sort of thesis is, I was thinking about the real math of business and what that means, and sort of the things that don't show up on the stats sheet. I was thinking about, specifically in sports that I follow, NBA, it's very common to stick two superstars on the same team or three superstars on the same team. But what you sometimes find is actually the production of the team goes down. So they get the better players per se, but they actually become a worse team. And so that would be someone looking at the numbers and they would be left confused. But I guess what you're doing through this podcast is analyzing what's like, we have the better resources here, but why are we not getting the better outcomes on the numbers? That doesn't make sense. But your insight and your gut is saying there's much more to this than just what's on the stat sheet.
There's so much in that. And even hearing you say that the second time around, my brain was pinging. So we'll just see what comes out. I think you're absolutely right. And if I think about the inverse, that was kind of the premise of the Moneyball movie, right? Was we kind of just have to take the misfits, put them together. And when we can make those stats work, then we can come up with a winning baseball team. I think you're absolutely right. And if I'm perfectly honest, I sort of intimated that how you've just defined it or described the thesis may be a more elegant way of how I'm thinking about it. I did start with an accounting degree. It's just start, and how I got to accounting was I actually wanted to be a sports physio because I love sports as well, right? And going up through high school, I played netball at an elite level, but I loved following cricket. I was such a fan of the Australian cricket team, and so my dream job was I want to be the sports physio of the Australian cricket team, right? So I was like, that's what I want to be when I grow up. But I thought, well, no, actually, physio, you needed a really high mark at the time. And I was like, there's no way I'm not smart enough. So, I did probably a classic accountant thing when I was putting in, you put your university preferences. I put physio number one because at the time only one university was offering a physio degree in New South Wales. And then all of the rest were just loaded with commerce this, commerce that, because it was like, well, you know what, if I really want to get into sports, into the sports industry, there are many ways to get in through just business. So I'll just do the just business degree, right? Uh, as fate would have it, I got the mark for physio, and suddenly I had, oh shit, what do I do now? I didn't think that was going to happen. And again, I probably, in hindsight, took the classic conservative approach and went, I don't want to pigeonhole myself so early. I'll do my commerce degree. Now I did commerce liberal studies, which was it was a new degree, commerce with a little bit of arts and a little bit of science. So even there, I didn't want to go all commerce. I still wanted to get a bit of breadth in there. So I think for my arts component, I did Italian, and for my science component, I don't even remember. That's how much I cared about it. Um, but I went to the physio classes. I'm not sure if I should be saying that in public, but a lot of my friends did physio. So I would go to the Cumberland campus at the University of Sydney, and I would turn up in the lectures, in the physio lectures, because I was still so fascinated by it. So I'd just share that because, it really ran deep, this kind of desire to learn about the body and look, actually, I've never even connected that dot, but maybe this is part of my fascination with humans that I didn't really know at the time. So, I did, from doing the commerce degree, I did commerce at University of Sydney, and there was just a path. It's a very boring path, but you go into Big Four, you get chartered, you go overseas, and you do great things, right? And so I took a very conservative path because, to be perfectly honest, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I thought if I just keep doing the conservative path, then at least I'm not making a mistake. Yeah. So I did the Big Four thing. I went overseas. That was wonderful. And that was actually the first opportunity to become an advisor. So I did audit. So I still went out and did engagement audits, auditor of engagements. But I also had the opportunity to become a national training instructor. So I was delivering training at the time. That was my first foray into delivering training. And I was like, I love this. And then I ended up being there for 4 years. And in the third year, they said, would you be interested in becoming a sampling specialist? Which basically is like super nerd. Go in and consult with engagement teams who might have kind of big errors based on their sample testing. So what that gave me was the opportunity to work with the most senior partners that were working on the NASDAQ listed companies over in the US and really advise them, right? And so I guess that was a really important time in my career because, quite frankly, I was there to get overseas experience, to live overseas and live that wonderful life. But actually, the work experiences were getting were actually quite transformational in terms of getting to where I am now. Because what happened, I came back to Australia and I got put back on mum and dad engagements, and it was boring. They were small. No one took accountability of their numbers. And I was like, this is crap. Fortunately, they put me on the national rollout from paper-based files to electronic files. So I was back in that advisory capacity internally, which meant I was able to do delivery of trainings and all the rest of it. Right. I was then probably year 3, 4 and beyond of delivering training to people. And I think, and I have never thought this before, so this is very, very live, real-time reflection. When you are training people from junior baby accountant to the most senior partner in both Australia, the US, and then in developing countries, which I had the opportunity to do back here in Australia, you have to modify your language, you have to modify your behavior, and you need to teach the same content in a different way because otherwise it just doesn't land, right? If I'm teaching, I had the opportunity to teach in Papua New Guinea. Well, in Papua New Guinea, sometimes the staff don't get to work because it's too dangerous to do so. Right? So you cannot have the same conversation with them than you do with, a very senior partner that works on SEC listed clients, right, in the US. So I think that was when I really had to take ownership and be very intentional about how I showed up, the language that I used in order to deliver an outcome. I had some children, which was wonderful. I knew I didn't want to become a partner at an audit firm, so I took that opportunity to move into corporate. And I do believe this is by accident, complete accident. I don't recall having too many interviews in this process, but they wanted me to do what is kind of a really boring project, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, because they wanted my SOX experience from the US. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can do that. That's fine. But I had the smarts to say, I can do the internal controls rollout, but I need a culture that is ready to support that rollout because what you're going to need is the cultural maturity of companies. And what I can tell you, that's really hard. So I said, can I play with people? And they said yes. And so they did. So I started in this role. It was the head of financial control, I think it was called, which is very much, what we refer to as below the line. It's very, very finance centric. But because I had opened the door to playing with people, and fortunately I was working for bosses that said, yes, please do that, I went in and I created my first Champions of Change, created a cultural transformation program, and had the opportunity to work with a couple of consultants that were doing finance transformation in our team. And I guess that was where I realized I really enjoyed fast-paced, energizing work that would create rapid change. So I was working with those consultants, and actually I had the sliding doors moment where at the same time, I must have been a little bit burnt out because I remember booking myself on this 5-day retreat. But at the same time, I was asked by the consultant, would you like to come out and do some non-finance work? I need some specialist work on a project that we're running on at a different company. And at the same time, the CEO saying, could you apply for the chief of staff role internally? And I was like, whoa, both of those opportunities sound amazing. And I guess what I did is the complete opposite of what I did back when I was selecting my university degrees. I said, actually, chief of staff internal would be the safe approach, but actually this would give me the soft landing outside of corporate. So I should probably take that. So that was really when I sort of jumped out of corporate into the land of consulting. And, fast forward, I think that was back in 2016. So fast forward 9 years, here we are today. I have made a ton of mistakes, but I think that experience, and I haven't quite, we'll kind of interrogate that a little bit more, but I think that experience has lent me to developing the real math of business as a concept and what really kind of revs me up about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, what an amazing journey, and there's so much I can take away from this. And as you're talking, I'm trying to pull together threads that we can start to go down because I kind of think that, based on everything that you're saying, there's certain what I would call like mental software that I can see from your earliest sort of days that you were talking about, even through to now. There's like certain thin threads. Like one thing that stood out to me is that you're someone who has always wanted to be multifaceted in a way. Like there's never been that one thing, and I think I'm the same way. I feel the same way. It's something that has allowed me to adapt into video podcasting from audio podcasting, is wanting to see new things and change in that way and learn new things. And I think that's a lot of what you're saying. Even when you're at uni doing accounting, you're still learning about physiotherapy just for fun because your brain, I think, is starting to see it's not their lessons in one area are not going to help define everything in my life. And so, I used this word at the beginning because I was actually thinking of it in a slightly different way. But I think that with your what you talked about with accounting actually is very similar to my mum's story as well, in the same way that she got into it as well. And I think that what's really powerful actually about that is that it gives you a really powerful base to act as a translator to people because, like, I mean, for example,
Mm,
even if you're just talking to my mum, for example, you like, I assume other people have made a decision where maybe they were like, I might start with accounting to sort of start there and then go from there and sort of build out that way. If a lot of people have had that experience and they can look at you and go, okay, I am also multifaceted as well. How has Alena began to sort of pull these threads
mm,
and interweave that into your life? Sorry to sort of ramble through all these different threads, but hopefully we can start connecting things. And then I think that what the big thing though that I actually thought was really interesting, and I think that it's actually prevented you from having a traditional accountant's life, is that you've had talents that have pushed you outside of like where you were originally thinking, right? And I think that this probably happens to everybody to some degree. Like you start your
mm,
career and then different talents pop up and you go, okay, I'll start heading down this direction. But obviously you're talking about like facilitation, that being a natural strength, where for people, when they typically think of people doing accounting, they don't think of interpersonal skills. So that within that field is huge. But even as a general thing, it's a talent that pushed you in one direction. And then again, you're looking at the numbers and what have you, and then you start realizing that there's a people focus thing happening
mm,
there. And then again, you have a talent for noticing that. And then you also then have this talent where you can come from that numbers side, but you understand the role of the people side, which again, not everybody has. And so when
mm,
I look at all of this, sort of put it all into the cauldron and let it boil, what I'm seeing is someone who has never thought that there is one thing. It's always been about like everything is much. It's like everything's more complicated than it's first thought, and you've always kind of. It's like your guts kind of felt that and just always been ready to
mm.
kind of deal with it. So
Huh.
so anyway, I guess you can reflect on that. But I was going to say, maybe if we take it back to maybe your earliest days, now that we've sort of started to see these threads, does this make any sense to how you sort of, because I feel like the real math of business has actually kind of always been in you. It's like now you've just got the experience to sort of quantify it in a way.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and one is I am actually not a very smart math person, right? So, um, I particularly I'll say it was my people skills that got me through public accounting, both in Australia and in the US. But I will share a story that is particularly exposing and mortifying, and I actually can't believe that this happened to me. Um, in the US, I remember I was working late one night, and I was a senior manager, so I wasn't junior. And a very, very senior and very, very technical partner came up to me and he said, Alena, can you come into my room, into my office? And yeah, sure. Because I worked for this partner, not in a direct capacity, but an indirect capacity. And he basically said, to paraphrase, because I think my brain has protected me by blocking the actual words he used. But he basically said, Alena, you don't really know much, do you? And it was like the weirdest thing. I was mortified. And and I kind of was um like I actually don't remember what I said, but he fully exposed my biggest weakness, right? Which was I am never going to know all of the technical standards inside and out. That was just never my thing. But that was also the thing that I never pretended to do, and I never relied on that technical side. But I never forget that moment, just going, "Oh my god, I've been discovered." So I've never, even though I've worked in a math industry, I've never actually had an expertise in the math, and that brings up all sorts of insecurities, right? But I guess the thing that did lead to my success was the people side. So there's been something inside of me that's gone, well, this can't just be about the maths, because if it were just about the math, I wouldn't be not only successful, because, success is judgmental, but I wouldn't have enjoyed it. Like, I actually wouldn't have enjoyed the people that I worked with. And this is the thing. Yes, you might be an auditor counting beans, but every time you count those beans, you need to get the beans from someone. You need to have a conversation with someone to get the beans, right? And I loved it. I met all sorts of great people, right? So there's a part of me that goes, yeah, you can throw any number at me. You can throw all sorts of standards. You can tell me I am the worst mathematician in the world. But actually, it doesn't matter, because if I can talk to you, if I can build rapport and engage in you in a way that we genuinely like each other or respect each other and trust each other, we'll get to where we need to get to. So there's that part of it. Well, so there was that experience. Then there was the experience where I went from auditing very, very large, publicly listed on the US stock exchange companies and having autonomy and freedom and doing a great job to coming back to Australia and working on these tiny little baby mum and dad companies. The audit requirements for both countries are different, which is why you have this distinction. And having no respect from the partners, being treated like a nobody and needing to put a bum on a seat. And I'm going, well, this just makes no sense. Like, I'm no worse here. Like, I'm still the same person. So from a business perspective, I was very frustrated. And I was going, and again, I'm kind of going, this makes no sense to me. And I think over the years since, so I really did have a lot of frustration from that experience. And over the years since, I think my frustration, which is, which I haven't been overtly frustrated, but the inner frustration, which has led to my conviction around this real math of business idea as a concept, is you talk to anyone and they will all say to you, we're in a people business. Like, even when I think about when I came back to Australia and the audit firm that I was working with at the time, we're a people business, was absolute bullshit. They did not care about the people. And I know that because of how I was treated when I came back. And I know that because of how other people in the business were treated. And so what frustrates me and what I guess what I want to hold people to account, that when they say that we're a people business and we value our people and we want to treat people well, I want that to hold them to account. Because I guess I have seen and experienced, but also seen where companies will say we are a people business, we care about our people. And then at the end of the day, they are very happy for people to be collateral damage in pursuit of numbers, right? And so I think there's that like, I want to prove it wrong. I want people to genuinely be able to say we're a people business, and I want people to behave that way, right? And I think they're in the minority. I work with many businesses that do that, but there are way more businesses out there that I believe don't. So there's that. In terms of going a bit further back, I think what I've learned, and I'm going to do my best to control my emotions here. So my mum was Tongan and my dad's Australian. My dad was in the Navy, and so met mum when he went to Tonga. I'm looking at you and you're making me want to cry. And they dated. He went back to Australia and he proposed on the phone. So mum was living in Tonga, dad was here. So dad's a white Aussie, was basically over there as part of a posting, worked for my grandfather, met mum, came back, proposed to mum over the phone. Mum came over and assimilated, right? So she was a Tongan. She was educated, but basically they married and then they had children, and mum was she cared for children at the beginning. And then when we moved to England with dad's next posting, we, typical Navy brat, moved everywhere. That was when she trained to be a secretary and started her executive assistant career. So I think the real math of business is a duality, right? It's the hypothesis or the mission that I'm on, I guess, is to show that it is not people or math. It is the two. And the job is to figure out how do you integrate the two so that you get the best of the best. Because the numbers, coming back to your very first point, do not tell the whole story. They will not give you success. They will give you something, but they won't give you success, right? So I think for me growing up, my experience was this cultural mishmash. It was duality. It was, dad was a white Anglo-Aussie and mum was a Tongan, right? And that brought up, and that was kind of complex because by the time we got back to Australia in 1988, well, it was the bicentenary. So we were celebrating colonialism, and I was a brown person moving into a white area. People were not racist to me. right? Because at the time, racism was very much, my observation is that it was very much directed at certain races. So I actually was not, people were not mean to me because of my race, but they did treat me different and I did feel different. So I kind of always felt this duality, the awkwardness of this duality existed for me. And also we had the Tongan culture and the Western culture. So growing up, there was this Tongan culture where I was like, oh, I don't want to be a part of that. Like, that's weird, that's different. That's weird but I just want to continue to assimilate. Right. So I've grown up with that feeling of duality. Now, as I've gotten older and as society has embraced different cultures and we are far more diverse than we have ever been, I've learned to, far too late, and having children and all the rest of it, I've learned to, I started the journey of learning more, wanting to learn more about my Tongan culture. So really bringing it in, right? Um, and then most recently, my mum passed away. And why that's relevant is that in her eulogies, consistently, eulogies that were written by people that did not know each other, they said the same thing. She was able to blend the Western way of doing things with her cultural heritage. When I heard those eulogies, it made sense. I was like, that is why. And so, if I think about your observation around, wanting to be multifaceted and not wanting to be one way, I think that makes a lot of sense because when I heard those eulogies, I was like, that is what's going on. So I know that's a lot, and I know I just got very emotional, but it is, I think, as I continue to go on this journey, I actually think that that's kind of where it all came from.
I mean, Ellen, I think that's a really amazing thing. I think it really explains. When I think about passion a lot, I think passion has to come from some sort of an emotional level. I think and I think passion's probably the most important fuel in the whole world, because it's what allows people to actually
Mm.
pursue things that are difficult. It's the thing, it's the fuel
Yeah.
that keeps you going. And I think what you're sharing there is how important like that foundation is in your life. I mean, when I asked the question, where does real math business come from in your early life? Like I was thinking about, just like clearly it's a thread that's through your whole life, but I can see how much like it's just actually a fundamental foundation of who you are is
Mm.
understanding the complexity. And it's so interesting that you say that because actually one of my friends also in school who was Tongan and sadly also passed away when I was a bit younger, he really represented, I think, that duality. And I don't know if it's just a Tongan thing, but he was like probably the badass of our school to some degree. He was the first guy to get a tattoo. He was a huge guy, but me and him had this really cool relationship outside of school where he was like, he would always drive me home if I was walking home. He at the gym was showing me what to do. Kindest guy you'd ever meet.
Mm.
And it was just amazing because to me, he represented so like if we're talking about duality, the man couldn't have represented more duality because to look at him and stuff, he was just a big guy and he kind of looked a bit scary. But of course, you meet him and he's a
Mm.
classic guy where he's just, so fun, loves life of the party. And so certainly hearing about your mum, I mean, that's my closest connection to Tonga. And he certainly, Tatu definitely represented that. So yeah, I mean, it's an amazing thing. And even if that's my only brief insight into what that sort of culture can even do at a small level, I mean, it's amazing, amazing.
Yeah, and I think Tonga is a tiny, tiny, tiny island. Many people actually have not heard of it. And so I think one of the things, and I don't know about your friend, but one of the things that I had to do, and again, maybe this is where it comes down to this, I want to fight the nuance and I want to fight the duality of the real math of business, because because no one really understood anything about Tonga. It was like it didn't exist, right? So I had to just fit in, like I had to just work with it and go, okay, so I don't have white skin, so I look different to everyone else. So that means certain things, growing up as a teenage girl, that means certain things. My body's a little thicker than most people, just because Tongans are a bigger, thing. That means different things to different people. And so I was constantly trying to figure out, well, how do I use my knowledge of what is normal, what's acceptable with who I am, and try and navigate that, because people were not being mean to me, because of it. But I guess it's how do you fit in, and then how do you stand out when you're not one or the other, and you're trying to just navigate the in between. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but maybe that's the skill. It's like that skill of trying to fit in
Mm.
because you stand out, but then going, well, fitting in and making yourself small is not good.
Mm.
So how do you then be yourself? So with that, again, I guess in and of itself is a duality, but I guess that's the whole point of it all, is you've got these two things that could be opposing, but maybe shouldn't be opposing.
Mm.
And so how do you take the best of the best so that you get a better outcome overall,
Mm.
right? Like, we know that diversity results in better outcomes, right? It should not be either or thinking. It should be and thinking.
Mm. Yeah, well,
So
yeah, I mean, just off that, I think that another thread that this has kind of made me think of, and maybe this is the sort of the broader theme of it, because I think that it could actually be sort of a bit of a link between same numbers but different outcomes, is how much you're able to actually leverage potential, I think, from people. Because sort of what I'm hearing here is it's like, it's almost like, because what you're describing, when you were talking about being sort of disrespected and put in a role that you were above in many ways, or it wasn't challenging to you in a way that you wanted to have your career be challenging, in a way that you,
well, it didn't leverage the skills that I just
yeah.
spent 4 years honing,
Exactly.
really.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, exactly. So that's like frustrating. And so obviously your potential's not being tapped into in that
Yeah,
situation.
yeah.
And I think that, I mean, I think everybody's worked in jobs where their potential's not being tapped into. A couple of years ago, I was working in a grocery store. And, after a while, you're like, I could be like at home, I'm animating, but here I'm doing this. It's like, just felt like a bit of a weird mismatch.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I wonder how much of what you're talking about is activating potential in teams, not just in not in a way that we would think of it in like a linear career trajectory way, but almost
Mm.
a more broad perspective of what potential is. Or but it's more than that, because I think it's also got to do, like, I don't know exactly, but that's something else that I'm kind of noticing with like how you're threading some different threads.
So I think, yeah, we always want to, we'll say unlock the potential or whatever. I think potential, definitely, because I do see the best in everyone. But actually what I notice, so what I find that I ignite in people is a bigger possibility for themselves. But actually what I want for every individual that I work with, whether I work with them individually or in a team environment, is I want them to all be themselves. Because I believe, because we kind of, we put ourselves in this box and this rigid person that we think we need to show up in a certain way. And I guess what I try to do is I go, hey, just chill out, just be yourself. We know the brain science that is going to unlock better thinking anyway, but also I want to hear your true perspective and opinion, because when we are talking from that truth, we can unlock your potential. We can see bigger possibility for yourself. And look, maybe, we've just gone from kind of very emotional upbringing and all of, that stuff, but maybe it's simply, my background in finance meant I was hanging around with lots of finance people. I now work primarily with chief financial officers. There is still a stereotype, right? And so when you go into that, you go, oh, I better fit in the box. And I guess my belief is, actually, if we can get you out of the box, you're going to be better.
You know what, Alena? I think you've done that yourself, and that's why it's so powerful. Is you, like, when you were like, when I hear about your story and you selecting the accounting degree, I think it's almost you putting yourself in that box, and then your journey has been getting yourself out of the box and going, guys, we don't need to be in the box. Like, we've got so much, we can do so much. You know what I mean? Like,
Huh.
in a weird way. I don't know if that rings true to you, but it sort of feels like it to me in a weird way.
Well, it does. And I think actually the most reflective, like, mirror thing that you've just said is you put yourself in the box. And I think there's something really interesting in that. I'm not sure if it directly links to the real math of business, but maybe again, if I kind of come back to the hypothesis, maybe what again, I'm trying to challenge the assumption that it's a maths game. Because actually, the maths, and come back to your basketball analogy, numbers mean different things to different people, right? And a number is a number is a number. And, even the stock market is driven by human emotion. So we kind of go, let's look at the stock market for pricing, because that's going to tell us the value of something. Well, yeah, it does tell you the value of it because it tells you what people think of it based on their human emotion. So I just, yeah, I'm now ranting.
No, that's really good actually. I was going to say one thing I've kind of picked up this is a bit more on a funnier thing, and then we can start
Yeah.
to sort of head into sort of some final thoughts because we've kind of gone all over the
Cool.
place. I don't know how much we've gone into what we want to do, but I think there's a core understanding of you and a core understanding of the philosophy is definitely in this thing.
Okay,
I
cool.
think that one thing that I'm realizing as well is because you've come from this sort of numbers world, it gives you I think that that's a real strength because I think it gives you the ability
Mm,
to talk numbers, and as you were saying at the start, your ability to translate to different people is really the strength. And I think that's some
mm,
part of this
yeah.
conversation when you're talking about talking to people in different contexts, from the US, it was a PNG as well. And then, in Australia, each context is different, and your ability it's like you almost are holding these ideas in a more conceptual way, and then you're channeling them to different things.
Mm,
Like, for example, my basketball example is very specific to me. That's my mind channeling that into that concept because I
yes.
can't elaborate on it in a different way. But I think your ability to understand concepts in a broader sense and then dial them in is really good. And I think that to some degree, one of the things that I think is something that people are like looking for from you or something that you've found or something. I don't exactly know how to phrase this, but it's like you're kind of coming at it like uh it's like you have almost in your head like the numbers that say it's okay to not trust the numbers in a weird way, or that's kind of what people are looking for that you kind of are providing. It's not necessarily numbers in this sense, but it's like almost it's like you have the stats that say it's okay to say that these numbers aren't like the final analysis of everything in a weird way.
Huh. Flesh that out a little bit more. I'm struggling. I'm
No, sorry, it's all right. It's a bit of an idea that I'm just kind of having, but it's
keep
like
going, keep
because
going.
I think that because what we were saying before, like you can have two different businesses, same setup, same
Mm,
market, even maybe same
mm.
exact thing. Like say just
Yeah,
take two
yeah,
startups that are pretty identical, trying to serve the same purpose.
yeah,
One might be successful and one might not be. And if you
yeah,
to look at the numbers, maybe there would be some things, but it may not be obvious what the numbers tell you. And what
yeah, yeah.
what I'm saying is like essentially what you're kind of doing through your accounting background is you're able to translate it. So you're almost like giving people the facts that say it's okay not to only believe the numbers, if you know what I mean. Like you're giving people almost
Yes.
permission to say this is not
Yeah.
the final story. This is like an
That's it.
element of the story.
That is not the final story. I actually love that. This is not the final story. This is not your truth. Um, you're allowed to have a bigger truth, a different truth. Um, and also maybe, and it probably depends on the different audience and what have you. Um, where are you in the numbers? Like maybe there's an element of, numbers are quite often quite depersonalized. And we do, and Stacey kind of alluded to this in the conversation. They can really get you down, right? But they don't need to. But at the same time, they can be quite motivating. Um, so I think, yeah, I definitely think there's something in there, and I wonder if it's even where are you in the numbers? You're not, you're not just a number. You're not just in this big business that creates these big numbers. Here you are, and you matter.
Yeah. Well, Alena, I mean, we've really touched I mean, we've had a lot of big conversations. I really only had one more question I really wanted to ask,
Yeah.
at this point, which is kind of unrelated to what we've been talking about, but I think it's a good place to end it anyway. Was Alena, you've been doing this podcast now for a few episodes and you've talked to a few people. I guess my
Yeah.
final question before we sort of wrap up here today, before we get into sort of final summaries and everything, is there anything that you've learned from doing the podcast that sort of sticks out to you? And it could be lessons from the guests or even just actually doing a podcast.
I did the podcast as a bit of an experiment. Yeah. And the experiment was, and this was actually based on conversation with your mum, who would come out after every podcast with so much energy and she'd rave about the guests that she'd spoken to and, all of the things. And I was like, oh God, that sounds good. And the experiment that I ran was, how much would I enjoy having having fun conversations with smart people? And how much would it add to my business? Now, interestingly, thinking about the numbers, this had nothing to do with the numbers, which is when I look at my business strategy, uh, this should not have been a priority, and this certainly should not have been a priority given the challenging year we've had with mum's passing and all the rest of it. Right? Um, I went in it with let's see what it does for my mojo. Let's see what it does for my thinking, the quality of my thinking. And let's just give it a go with no expectation that it would touch the bottom line. And I guess, and you know this because I tell you every time, like I have shown up through the hard times. And I think I validated the experiment that it is good for business. I can't tell you where in the numbers, why it's good for business, but it's good for the people side of this business. And if we assume that when you've got people, if you assume that business performance equals human performance, and it certainly does in a business as small as mine, there should be some sort of translation in terms of what business success, however you choose to define that. But, even if I take a bigger company, if every human in that business is motivated, is really purpose driven and will find a way to deliver, I think it's proven it's proven that hypothesis. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, you
It's a
did.
great question.
You did, because I think like really what I wanted to know is like from just what you'd done as your own experience in podcasting, how's that changed? Your thinking. So that's perfect. Really, it's just it's actually about the podcast itself acting as something that is something where
Mm.
it's like a prioritization in a certain way.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, I think it's great. That's great.
awesome. Well, I've loved it.
Yeah. Well, Alena, thank you so much for this. Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to touch on? I mean, we've really gone in a bit of a random roundabout way, so I don't know what you kind of want to pick up on, but is there anything else that you kind of wanted to leave people with at all?
No, other than I'll say that I want to give people permission that success is not one size fits all. And I think our guests every week prove that to us. And, I invite anyone who's watching this, if they want to be a guest, reach out to us. If they've got a particular area that they want us to focus on, reach out to us, because I think I am, yes, I'm on a mission and clearly I've shared that today, but I don't know the answer. And I don't know if there is an answer. I think there are multiple ways to skin a cat. And what I think I'm learning, and I look forward to, being on the other side of 50, 100 episodes, is kind of going, well, what are some answers? I look forward to that. So, if people want to contribute to that conversation and share with us their thoughts, I'm open for that. I'd love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Alan, I want to thank you so much for this episode has been amazing. And I mean, as you've mentioned, it's been a sort of big year, but you've done so well with the podcast. I think it's been excellent for people that have been actually tuning into the YouTube and stuff. They'll see the numbers are absolutely going fantastic. So we want to thank everybody that's been tuning in as well, because it's been a
100%.
really fun show to make. And from my perspective, I've had a blast doing it and learning. Like even we recorded an interview before this, which will be a different episode, but even that episode, I was just jotting down notes because there's just so much interesting stuff that I'm taking away. Even when the listeners will not see me behind the scenes, I'm still having a great time learning all this stuff. So even as a listener myself, I'm loving it. So thank you, Alena.
Lovely. Thank you, Jez.
No worries.
Appreciate you.
Well, Alana, did you want to send people off? I guess you can just say thank you for listening to The Real Math of Business, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jez. And look, thank you so much again for listening and watching the Real Math of Business podcast. It is an absolute delight to produce and work on this for you. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you soon.
No worries. Thank you.